Hi there. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Dr. Katere Adeseko-Pourseied, and I'm a psychology lecturer at the University of Northampton and the owner and founder of Positive Psychology for Life. I really hope that this brief talk on mental health and well-being will give you an insight into the active role we play within our own well-being, leaving you empowered by the end of this. This quote by Eckhart Tolle quite nicely summarizes how much our minds are usually preoccupied with too much past or too much future and very little present. Of course, it's important to plan ahead. It's necessary and actually gives us a sense of control and certainty that we need in our lives. Equally, reflecting back on our past experiences helps us grow within ourselves as a person. But when it becomes too much, and like the quote says, we feel a lot of unease, anxiety, and tension. This is when it becomes quite detrimental to our physical and mental health. A very broadly researched and successful approach to becoming more conscious of our thoughts is mindfulness, and part of it includes grounding exercises that are really helpful and the fastest way to calm ourselves down and bring our attention back to the present moment. These include breathing exercises, stimulating our senses, and many other mindfulness activities. Being in the right mindset, being focused and motivated, is essential to being successful and productive. And this is not just for your professional life, but also your personal life. But what is it that influences our mindset, and how can we use these influences to enhance our productivity? The main three things that influence who we are and what we do are our behaviors, our feelings, and our thoughts, which all feed into one another. This might seem obvious to some of you, but many people don't take time to think about this explicitly, and even fewer actually take the time to notice these influences in their daily lives. Before we go any further, I think it's also important to understand the difference between feelings and thoughts. Again, this might seem obvious to some people, but we often use the two interchangeably. For example, we say things like, I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. And that isn't actually a feeling, it's a thought. The feeling might be something like frustration. So, as a general rule, if you can't express it in a single word, it's probably a thought rather than a feeling. Now, let's have a look at an example of this interaction in front of us. An unhelpful thought, such as I'm not making any progress, can make you feel anxious and stressed and drive you to stay up all night working and worrying. Now, being sleep deprived means you make even less progress and feel even more anxious and stressed the next day. But the more anxious you feel, the more unhelpful thoughts you have, and the more you feel the need to stay up all night working or worrying for that matter. So once you have an unhelpful thought, feeling, or behavior, it's very easy to have others, and you could end up stuck in this negative cycle. And of course, that isn't very good for you at all or your performance. So the first step to getting out of this rut is to notice when you are in one. And isn't always as obvious as we think either. So to help us notice the early signs before we get too deep into this spiral, it's good to have a go now, for example, at thinking of some examples of when your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors have all influenced one another. It could be an example of your professional or your personal life. It really doesn't matter. It's just important to give you that idea of how much they all feed into each other, as much as they're also very different concepts. It's a good indication and it helps you to become more aware of your own triggers. So now that you know what a negative cycle might look like and how it can hold you back from progressing, how can you break the cycle? An easy way is to identify and stop any unhelpful behaviors, such as working through the night, skipping or rushing meals, forcing ourselves to work long periods of time, avoiding contact with others, etc. Feelings are a little bit more difficult to change directly. We can't really just decide to start feeling happier or more motivated, but it's possible to change them indirectly by changing our behaviors or thoughts. Feelings can often seem quite uncontrollable because they're caused by factors outside of your control, such as our experiences or things that happen to us. But this isn't actually entirely true because our feelings are a result of our experiences and how we think about the experiences. So how we actually appraise the events that happen to us. So we can control our feelings by controlling our thoughts, and we will come back to this in a second. But finally, we can break a negative cycle by challenging unhelpful thoughts. And to do this, the first step is to recognize what an unhelpful thought looks like and identify when we're having one. So you now know how to recognize an unhelpful thought and why it is so important to challenge this type of thinking. Unfortunately, breaking the cycle isn't as simple as avoiding the thoughts or thinking about something else, because that usually makes things worse. So we will look now at these 3 techniques to challenge your unhelpful thoughts. And there is no need to memorize these, of course, but it's an introduction and hopefully gives you the idea of picking apart unhelpful thinking. Just see what works for you. So first of all, what is the evidence? A lot of our unhelpful thoughts are either completely unfounded or a huge jump away from any kind of evidence. So ask yourself, what is the evidence that the thought is true? Is the evidence based on facts or opinions? And if you've thought it before in the past, was it completely true every single time? There's a few other pointers on here as well. The second technique is called what is the alternative? So you ask yourself, is your thought the only possible truth? Or are you jumping to conclusions or overgeneralizing? We tend to do that sometimes, don't we? Are you confusing thoughts for facts? And what alternatives are there and which is the most likely? You might have established using the first 2 techniques that your unhelpful thought is unlikely to be true. Now ask yourself, what if it is true? Realistically, what's the worst outcome of your thought being true? And how likely is it that the worst outcome will happen? When you're thinking about this, be realistic and don't catastrophize. Again, a tendency we might all be the victim of sometimes. It's also helpful to think about whether, if your unhelpful thought is true, it will matter to you tomorrow, next week, next year, or even in 10 years. Next, what's the best way to deal with the situation? Thinking negatively about it and dwelling on it is never the answer, even if it is out of your control. This approach would only throw you into this negative cycle again, and it won't help anyone, most importantly, not yourself. So think about what positive steps you can take to improve the situation. And most importantly, be kind to yourself. We will look at this in more detail now. So we've seen how to challenge unhelpful thoughts using 3 techniques. But to really break the cycle and get out of it, we need to frame our inner thoughts and our self-talk in a helpful and constructive way. Think of something that has been holding you back. For example, it might be something, again, professionally or personally, but just imagine a 5-year-old version of yourself coming to you, or a close friend or a dear family member. What would you say to them? What advice would you give them? For one, you would probably be very compassionate, right? And then you would try to give them an alternative to try and make them see it from a different perspective. And this is exactly the same approach you need to take with yourself. We tend to be so self-critical all the time. So self-compassion really is key. That is really what we owe ourselves. Why not? So next time you notice yourself having a negative thought, don't beat yourself up about it. Challenge it using those 3 techniques we just covered, and remember to speak to yourself as if you were 5 years old, or your best friend for that matter. So we focus a lot on unhelpful thoughts and negative cycles because this is what can really hold us back from making progress. But it also works both ways, and this is really key to remember. Positive as well as negative. So positive thoughts, feelings and behaviors all influence one another as well, and they cause more positivity and therefore productivity. For example, achieving a goal will make us feel satisfied and proud and make you think you're making progress. Positive thoughts, on the other hand, of course, will make you feel good about yourself. It will make you feel better and it will make you want to achieve even more goals. And the better you feel in yourself, the easier it will be to achieve them. Just like you can use this knowledge to break a negative cycle, you can also use it to start a positive one. So how can we start a positive cycle? Again, behaviors are a very good place to start. Things like getting enough sleep, taking regular breaks, and eating properly seem obvious, but are easily overlooked, particularly if you're feeling stressed. Wouldn't you agree? And exercising, for example, or getting some fresh air, spending time in nature, they're all proven ways to make us feel good and kickstart a positive cycle. Setting a smart goal is also a very good tip. They're achievable, they're realistic, and setting a goal and achieving it is guaranteed to make us feel positive about ourselves and our work. There are plenty of resources online about smart goals, so have a look. Another great tip is to spend time with people who make us feel good, of course. We seek connection and belonging, so it's very important. Positive and helpful thoughts will come from positive behaviors, but there are ways to kickstart the cycle with some positive thoughts. And a very great tip and very widely researched concept is gratitude. Try and think of 3 things that you're grateful for, either at the beginning of your day or at the end of your day. It really starts reframing your mindset into a more positive one. Feeling grateful has shown to boost our mood and productivity, and it's highly associated with well-being. Another one is to notice what's going on around us. So, what can we see, hear, smell, taste, touch? These are part of grounding techniques again that help us to stay in the present and not get lost in thoughts about the past or the future. Again, feelings are easier to change via our thoughts or behaviors. But one way to evoke positive feelings is through mental imagery. Visualize yourself achieving something and feeling proud or happy in the past. All your achievements so far. We tend to forget those, right? Or imagine what it feels like to achieve your future goals, or certain songs or videos or photos that you associate with positive emotions from the past. So, in conclusion, it's this quote by William James quite eloquently summarizes up, and I think it's still very much to the point till this day. The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. And this is very powerful because it shows that we don't always have to depend on our quick fixes or external factors. Actually, the power lies within ourselves. By changing the way that we think and make sense of the experiences that we occur in our lives, we can really make a big difference for ourselves and our well-being. In the end of the day, psychological change can be quite unsettling. It can make us feel uncertain and not in control, and that simply adds to feeling stressed and drained. So the most important thing is to focus on the things that are in our control, starting with our own mental and physical well-being. I really hope that this brief video has given you some insight and more practical ways that you can add to your toolbox for looking after your well-being. For more information on the bespoke training and workshops that we offer, please visit our website or email me directly. I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day and that you continue or start looking after your mind, body, and soul, because you certainly deserve it and are worth it. Thank you.